Well, welcome everybody, and those of you who are still joining. Today, our topic is why is revenue a terrible way to measure your company? And let me give you a little background of my life. Uh, I've been an entrepreneur my entire working life, and most of all of my companies actually have been bootstrapped. How many of you have bootstrapped your companies? Anybody? Yeah, there's one couple. Um, how many of you have investors? I've actually been an angel investor. Did not do very well at it, but at one point I had a piece of maybe 12 companies. Um, and then how many of you bought your company or have debt to get your company going? So those are typically the three ways that companies get started, or people buy companies or take over companies. I've never done it with debt myself, but almost all of them, and in my experience, they all judge a company by this one number, this revenue. Is it a $1 million company, $10 million company, $100 million company, and then somebody invented the phrase unicorns for $1 billion company. Um, and I have a problem with that, and I'll tell you why. But I think the source of that comes from grade school and sports because we're used to grading ourselves with a single number. Your grade point, your GPA in school, the numbers on the scoreboard in sports, and we're used to comparing ourselves to everybody else. And, basically we say, is mine bigger? Now, maybe that's a male thing. I don't know if women say, are mine bigger? But either way, the revenue number seems to fit our ability to just get one number and compare to everybody else. The problem is it's not really a good number for most of the things that we want to do as business owners. Let me give you an example. Um, I'm a business coach right now in my retirement. Actually been doing it for 25 years. And I'm right now working with two companies, many of them, but two of them have $8 million in revenue, approximately the same number of employees. Last year, one of the owners took home $400,000 in profit. I mean, in addition to their salary. So it was a 5% profit. The other one took home 2.4 million, 30% profit. What's the difference? If you just said, well, these are both $8 million companies, they're very, very different. They're different industries. They have different cost structures. Obviously, that affects what the owners are going to get out of the company. But what's also interesting is that the one with 400,000 revenue, the 5% of profit, that actually has a higher valuation because it has more tangible assets. It has less owner dependency. So if that owner wanted to sell the company, it would be worth more. So revenue, this is my way of sharing with you that revenue is not the main way to judge the value of a company. A lot of it depends, in this case, on the business model. One of those businesses that I mentioned has actually fixed assets, repeatable customers. They have a team that is not dependent on the owner for the day-to-day work. The second one is much more transient. I'm not saying they're a fly-by-night company by any means, but it's all sales. The service is all done by contractors. They have good reviews on Amazon and I mean, Google, but there is nothing there once the owner goes away. So it's very different. If if the industry or the business model is what determines the value of your company, that's not entirely under your control. Once you are in a particular business, in a particular industry, a lot of your business model is defined for you. If you're in a brick and mortar business, your business model is defined. If you're in a SaaS software business, your business model is defined. If you do consulting, your business model is defined. There's a million different models, but they constrain what your company is going to do and what its value is. Your business model is not entirely under your control. It's under the control of your customers, how they want to buy, how they want to be sold to. Now you can branch out. So if you have a product, you make a product, for example, you can sell it retail, you can branch out and sell it wholesale. Now you have two different business models under the same roof. But other than that, it's not entirely under your control. So what are the things that are under your control? Well, the main thing that's under your control is your time. If you think about all the business owners and the entrepreneurs that you emulate, whether it's Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates, they all have the same 24 hours in a day that we do. No more, no less. And what we do in that time is entirely under our control. Hold that thought. We're going to get back to that in a minute. But the other thing I said that's problematic with revenue is that we tend to use it to compare to everyone else. Oh, that guy's got a revenue number that's bigger than mine. Oh, I must be worse than him, or vice versa. If we're not to compare to everybody else, then what should we be comparing it to? And the answer is we should be comparing it to the reason we got into business in the first place. In other words, what do we want from our companies? And when we talk about the vision of our companies, usually we're looking at the vision, what we want for our companies. We want it to grow this big. We want this many employees. We want maybe more locations. That's our vision for it. But what do we want from it? And another way to ask that question is, if your business was a genie, what would you ask it for? If your business popped up and said, "Hey, I can grant you any wishes that you want," what would you want? What would you want from the business? And in my experience working with business owners over the last 25 years, there are three universals that people want. They want more money. They want time away, usually, from their company. Often they say, "Oh, I'm just swamped here. I can't get away. I don't have time to take a vacation. I don't have enough time with my family." So they want a better schedule. And then the third thing that we want is work that we love. We don't want to be forced into doing stuff that we hate to do. Those are the three universals. There are also about 20 other things that I've found business owners want that aren't so universal. Some business owners want to leave a legacy. Some want to serve a mission. Some want to build a community of either people they work for or people they work with. Some want to travel. A lot of other things. Like I said, I've collected about 20 of them. But those three are universal. More money, time away, work that you love. I call that your superpower. Doing work that you love, that you're good at, and that really makes an impact. And usually for entrepreneurs, that work is strategic. It's important work. It's not always urgent, and it's not always the day-to-day work, but sometimes we get trapped in that day-to-day work. And so think about, are you getting what you want from your engagement in your company? Now, I don't mean you're going to be happy every day. I think it's Warren Buffett's biography is called Tap Dancing to Work, as if, we, we don't love it every day, but we're ultimately getting what we want. If that's not happening, then you can change the organization of your company and your participation in it. And that's a little bit of what I want to talk to you about today. When I say we get caught up in the urgent and that keeps us from doing the things that are strategic and important and the things that we love, the way it tends to look like is I can't do the work that I love because I have to do the stuff that needs to get done, or we can't make payroll, or I can't pay off my loan, or this won't happen, or this customer won't be happy. And because I'm doing all that stuff, I don't have time to grow the company or to get time away or to get time off to get out of that day-to-day stuff. It's like a vicious circle. And here's something that I've noticed. When you think about it that way, it really helps to separate the company from yourself. Legally, your company is a different entity than you are. And you should think about it that way as well. The company has needs. It needs customers. It needs to find more customers. It needs to fulfill the value that those customers pay for. It needs to track money. It needs to hire people. It needs to do all these things. And that's not you. That's somebody, but it may not be you. And what I call those needs, filling those needs, I call that outputs. And what I've said in my book, Output Thinking, which I happen to have a copy of right here, uh, that's the reason you hire people. You hire people to produce outputs. And those outputs fall into seven buckets. One bucket is sales, one bucket is fulfillment. Those are the two main ones that a company needs to not only survive, but to thrive. Then you need to hire people. You need to deal with the HR stuff, manage people, train people, do all that good stuff. That's another bucket. The money is a bucket. You have to make sure the money's coming in, going out to the right places at the right times. And you have to get some analysis from that money, some CFO level analysis so that you can make better decisions. That's the money bucket. There's a bucket called information and decisions so that people who make decisions repeatedly in your company have the right information to do that. They have access to it so that the information isn't living in people's heads. What I call grandma in the kitchen with no recipe. She makes great food, but it's not scalable. You can't build a restaurant around grandmas. They're very expensive and they're very hard to scale. That's the information bucket. And then there's a bucket of protection, which I call CAFE, the compliance, administrative support, facilities. These are things that you check off once in a while, make sure that you're happening with them. Your insurance is one, your legal support, all that kind of stuff. That's a whole nother bucket. And then the last bucket is growth. How do you scale the company? So those are the things that the company needs. It doesn't have to be you, but each of those outputs has a time frame with it. And if you think about the time frame, so one of the buckets, one of the outputs that needs to be, and it's in the money bucket, is your tax returns. You're probably starting to think about that this time of year. As if those of you who are listening to this recording, it's January 2025 as we're talking. You're starting to think, oh man, I got to get these numbers out and get my tax returns. Your tax stuff is an annual frequency. Your other financial reports are a monthly frequency. There's hiring that you do, which is typically done as needed. You have sales, and that's the frequency of sales is determined often by customers and how often they respond to your marketing. Marketing is usually done on a schedule. It's so many, let's say, blog posts or SEO things that you do on a daily or weekly basis. Maybe you market through trade shows. Those happen annually. So that marketing is determined on a schedule, and the fulfillment of what your customers buy, that's triggered by when the sales come in. So every output that's in your company has a frequency. What's missing from that list that I just gave you is there's nothing on there that's really strategic about saying which markets are we in for, how are we going to grow, what do we need in the next 3 years, 5 years, that kind of thing. Because most of those outputs that we just discussed, they're important. I mean, and they're urgent, but the strategic ones are often not urgent. They're important, but not urgent. And if you don't plug those in, you're not going to have time for them. And those, as entrepreneurs, those tend to be our superpowers. So one of the solutions is to look at how you spend your time through the lens of what outputs you are producing for the company. And then what is the frequency that's associated with those outputs? Once you see that, you will see why your time is taken up in things that may be daily or weekly and don't give you time to get away and see the bigger picture. So take those outputs that are more frequent and teach somebody else to do it. There's a great quote that I read. It was attributed to John D. Rockefeller when he was building Standard Oil. And there's not a whole lot of Rockefellers that I emulate, but this was a pretty good quote. It's from the book Titan. And it says, he's talking to new employees. And he says, has anybody taught you the, the rule of our office? The rule of our office is as soon as you can, get somebody else to do your work, sit back, put your feet on your desk, and think about how you can make us more money. And that's really the job of a business owner is to get other people doing the day-to-day work, the work that has frequency, and you sit back and plan and think how you can make more money. Or if you don't want to make more money, if you want to do something else, how you can do that. So that's the solution is to spend your time getting on in the more strategic things, but recognizing that the other things have to be done. They just may not have to be done by you. The reason that many entrepreneurs have a problem with this is that entrepreneurs tend to be intuitive. We tend to be quick. We tend to just jump in and fix things and do things. We don't tend to be procedural. We don't tend to be structured and organized. We are often what I said called the grandmother in the kitchen with no recipe. Make great food, but it's hard to scale. And if you can either force yourself to be more procedural or get somebody in, like Brian Wilson, who I see is on today's call, or other people who can help you systemize what you do, get that wisdom out of your heads into a recipe, then that will be something that you can now train people to do. So the company still needs all those buckets filled. They just don't need to be done by you. And that will free up your time. And then you can start to look at your company and say, how am I getting what I want from it? And that's really the best way to judge how your company is doing. And if I'm not getting what I want from it, what will it take? There are many times when it does take time to grow in order to get what you want. I was talking to two guys one time, both in their 60s, brothers, and they had a company in Western Massachusetts that serviced some kind of industrial machine. I can't remember exactly what it was. And one of them was mostly the sales guy, and one of them mostly ran the shop and the people that went out on the field and did the machinery. And they were doing about 2 million in revenue. And they said, well, we'd like to retire. We're getting into our 60s. We want to get rid of this thing. We want to sell it. And I said, well, it doesn't look like it's that saleable because so much depends on you on a day-to-day basis. If you grow it a little bit more, not just because of the revenue, but in terms of being able to hire people to take over what you do on a day-to-day basis, then you can do one of two things. You might be able to sell it, and for the most part, it wouldn't be noticeable to the customers because they've already been dealing with other account executives and other field technicians, et cetera. Or you could do what I often call exiting without selling your company, which is one of the things that I did. I had a company for 25 years. For 23 of those years, I lived 1,500 miles away. And this was in the 1990s when the internet didn't make that exactly easy. Uh, what I did was I had worked myself out of a job. I did very few things in the company. I did some of the finances. At first, I trained people. The hardest one was to train people to do the marketing. We were trying to figure out how that worked. Once I got rid of that, I was working maybe 10, 15 hours a month. And you can exit the company without selling it. I looked into selling the company, and somebody who was in the M&A space told me it would probably be worth 3 times my EBITDA. And I thought, well, why would I sell this? In 3 years, I'll have all that EBITDA money and the company, and I'm not working that hard. So if your company gets to a place where it doesn't need you for the day-to-day stuff and it doesn't need full-time strategic work, then that's an option for you too, to exit without selling the company. But ultimately, it comes back to knowing what you want from the company. And I mentioned the 7 buckets before. The 7 buckets are all within the company, but the eighth bucket is what you get from the company as the owner. And so I would encourage you to judge success by where you spend your time and what you get from your company, and not just the revenue number. So I want to share with you one other thing as I've done this and I've looked at companies through the lens of what the owners are doing with their time. I ran into a concept in a book about exiting. And this guy was John Brown is his name, and I can't remember the name of the book right now. But he was talking about when companies are sold, there were three stages of companies. And he said the first one is the owner is hands on, head down. And he said those companies aren't worth that much. They're usually so owner dependent. The second stage, he called it hands off, but head down. And those are worth a little bit more. And the third company is head up, hands off. And those are worth the most. I took that concept and I expanded it to looking at not just what the company is worth, but what the owners do with their time. And I want to share my screen with you here and show you this chart that I developed. Um, and I look at it this way. The focus of a stage one company, and this is based on the focus of the owner or the CEO, which are usually the same person at that stage. The owner or CEO is focused on making and selling the product. At stage two, the owner is focused on building the company. This is a big switch. Now your focus is internal instead of external because you have others to build the product and others to sell it. And in stage three, the owner is focused on building an organization or a brand, often by acquiring other companies or organic expansion. This is where your company tends to become a regional or even a national powerhouse, a national name. And then if you go down the list on the left here, your time as a stage one owner is mostly spent interacting directly with customers. You're selling, you're doing production. You may have people that help you do this, or you may be doing a little bit of both. I recently moved from a house here in Pittsburgh that was 120 years old. And as you can imagine, I had lots of contractors. Almost all of the contractors that I got, none of them had websites, which was shocking to me. They all did really good work. They all came highly recommended. And I would say to them, why don't you have a website? And many of them said, I don't want to grow anymore. I have a good crew. I get to take a vacation once in a while. I make good money. I don't want the hassle of building a good company, a big company. And I've had clients who want to stay at stage one. They like that interaction with the customers directly. If they move to stage two, they're mostly spending time with employees and with managers because now they have other people who are doing the sales, who are doing the production, who are out there interfacing with the customers. It's all about what you want. My recommendation, if you want to be a stage one company and you want to stay there, my recommendation is be really good at what you do and raise your prices. Price yourself near the top of the market. You should be losing some percentage of your bids or of your sales based on price. Not all of them, not a whole lot, but enough. If you're not losing any because of price, you aren't priced high enough. So time, stage one, you will spend with customers. Stage two, you will spend internally with employees, with managers. Stage three is mostly spent outside the company. You are looking at industry leaders, you're looking for joint venture partners, you may be looking for other companies to acquire, and you have people in-house, often with P&L responsibilities. And that comes down to the next level on the chart. Employees, people with stage one, employees are directed by the owner. They usually do production and they really take personal effort to get results. In stage two, there's managers. Processes are in place to support people's best work. By stage three, you have directors. Some of them have P&L responsibility. And it's really more about the responsibility that people have and the outputs that they are producing than their actual job title. Let's go down to energy. Energy in stage one can vary quite a bit. You get an adrenaline rush when you close that deal, disappointment or even despair when cash is tight and you can't make payroll. Um, Stage two is a little more steady. There are highs, there are lows. Stage three is like stage two, but maybe not happening for everybody at the same time. There may be one department that's really cooking and another one that's having some problems, but it's not all at the same time due to the size of the organization. Accounting is different. Stage one accounting is usually checkbook accounting, cash based. Money comes in, money comes out. If there's money left at the end of the week, hey, it's great, honey, we can go out to dinner. Um, in stage two, regular accounting reports are happening not just for taxes, but for managerial insight. You can get some insight about which customers are buying more, which products are selling better, what your margins are, et cetera. And in stage three, sophisticated financial options are used because you need to grow internally and you need to often get outside investment or outside debt, and that takes pretty sophisticated financial reports. Stage one planning usually is just through the end of the next month. Can we make the payments? Is it, or sometimes by project. Stage two is a little further out than stage one, but often they don't really have annual plans. Or if they do have annual planning, they don't use those plans once they're back from their planning session. By stage three, planning is critical, and you often plan 3 to 5 years out. I know there's a lot of people and a lot of systems start with, what's your 10-year vision? And I think if you're in a SMB level company, 10 years is fantasy. I mean, it's nice if it gets you moving, if it gets you motivated, that's great. But think about your life 10 years ago. Did you see yourself where you are now? Probably the world has changed quite a bit in those 10 years. And it's probably going to change quite a bit in the next 10 years. So you can't really plan for 10 years. You can get excited about it, but you can't really plan. But 3 to 5 years you can. And in a stage three company, you probably need to. Um, Time away from the business. This is one of the three universals that most of business owners want. In a stage one company, when the owner's not present, things go haywire. This is the typical you own a job, not a company. Stage two, owners can get away, sometimes for business reasons, sometimes for personal reasons, and things are fine. You can spend a week, 2 weeks, a month away from your company because you have people that can run it on a day-to-day basis. And stage three, no problem at all. Time away is often required for business reasons, for doing the deals that we're talking about. Or many times people at this level, they own several companies. They're running a holding company. And so they dip into one for a while, dip into another for a while, or they're doing other things. Maybe they're involved in philanthropy or some other endeavor. Um, Outside advisors here. Usually at stage one companies, they have a CPA who just does taxes. And often they have a payroll firm because payroll is just too nuts to try and do it yourself. By stage two, they tend to have many more advisors. There's an accountant, there's an advisory board, perhaps, there's a lawyer, there's a coach. There are other advisors to help them do what they need to do. By stage three, some of those are brought in-house. You may have an in-house attorney, you may have in-house accounting staff, and they specifically use outside accountants or outside contractors and advisors as industry consultants. Sales happens for stage one. It happens when you put effort into it, and then it slows down when you don't. And if you're working from project to project, often you end a project and go, what happened to my sales pipeline? Well, you weren't doing any marketing, you weren't doing any sales, the pipeline's dead. So now you got to spend time filling it back up. Stage two, sales do happen constantly because you have marketing and salespeople that are on the job all the time. It's a process and it's done by full-time people. And obviously at stage three, there are the full-time people, and that also includes strategy at the VP sales level. So you'll have directors or VP level people who are saying, these are the sales that we should go after. These are the markets that I think are ripe. We're not in them yet, but these are the ones we should go for. Compensation at the low end of stage one, owners often don't even earn market rates for their work. They don't think about their time as having a dollar value. They consider it free. And at the high end, I used to say stage one, people could make a good living maybe 100 to 200K. There are some high-end, what I'd call um, practices, like neurosurgeons, for example. They're a stage one company, and they can earn a lot more. Rock stars, athletes, these are people who can make a lot more base, but it's really still a stage one company. It's all about them. Um, you have to be lucky or you have to be good in a particularly lucrative area to make that kind of money on a stage one company. Stage two companies are very different. Salaries and profits can be very lucrative, many times in the millions. But often at a stage two company, and this speaks to where I got these concepts from John Brown, who was talking about exits. Often the profits of a stage two company are taken out of the company for lifestyle reasons. So you may have entrepreneurs who have houses in multiple places. They may own boats or private jets or things like that. And it's all paid for by the profits of the company. Stage three companies can be even more profitable, but often most of those profits are put back into building the organization. Um, how many private jets can Jeff Bezos use? You know, um, stage two companies, like I said, can be very lucrative. Not to where maybe not to where you can buy a sports team or a U.S. senator or something like that, but stage three can be much more than that, and then that turns into wealth. Owners in stage one companies can often earn a living, sometimes a good one, but there's not much wealth in the company itself. Stage two companies, they definitely can provide wealth, though often that wealth is built outside the company in a nest egg. And one of the things that I typically recommend to my clients is that as they're building their companies, particularly through stage two, is that they have a nest egg outside the company. And the reason for that is you often make more money outside the company. You think you make more money if you just keep it all invested, but if you don't really know your return on invested capital numbers, you may be diluting yourself. And sometimes these companies grow despite the money that you put into them, not because of them. So it's really important to know that. The other reason for having a nest egg outside the company is because your company is risky. Any company can be at risk, particularly the smaller ones, at risk of market forces or things that you can't control. And if you have wealth outside the company, it allows you to make better decisions. It allows you to plan for the long term. It allows you to ride through the ups and downs better. And it also allows you to take advantage of some of the opportunities that might come your way if you don't, that you can't take advantage of if you don't have the money. Um, Obviously, in stage three, these companies contain a lot of wealth internally, and it's usually realized when the company is sold, or it's often passed down to future generations, or people can take these companies public. One thing to notice is that your company may not be at the same stage in all of these categories. You may be at early stage one or early stage two in some of them, later stage two or even stage three in others. And so you think about how that works and where you want to spend your time growing the company. And then the biggest question is, are you happy with the stage that it's at? And if not, what changes do you want to make? So that's my reasoning for thinking that the revenue is not the only way and usually not the best way to judge your company. Um, if you'd like to know more or if you'd like a copy of that chart, this is where you can find me, ceobootcamp.com. Go ahead and send me an email, john at ceobootcamp.com, and tell me you want the chart about the stages, or if you have any other questions or if there's anything else that I can do, I'd love to help. Now I'll open it up for questions if anybody has any questions. Okay, I put you all to sleep. I see I've done well.
John, I'll always say like I really just like the opening question. Um, in terms of, if your business was a genie, what would you ask of it, right? Like, I've never heard that as like a way to frame it. But I thought it was a great way to kind of get the gears turning in my head in terms of like, oh yeah, why am I doing this?
Right.
What do it? Because you get into the reps, and you go head down on stuff and you find your lane and you do that and you can add different folks. But like, I think most of the folks that are on this call, myself included, are so used to head down getting stuff done that they don't, put their head up and say, "Oh yeah, why am I in that?" So I don't necessarily have a question about that, except for
Well, yeah, thanks for
it's a
thanks for
great
sharing
way to
that.
ask. Yeah.
Many of us um, quit our jobs to go find a company, to buy a company or something like that. I myself never had a job, never had a serious job. Uh, I was always running away from having a boss. And it took me a while to figure out what am I running toward? Because you only get so much satisfaction from running away. Um, but yeah, it was when I started thinking, why am I doing this? And what if I were successful? And then it became, now that I am successful, what do I want to do with my time? Because time is that thing that there's always more money. If you go to work every day going, how am I going to get more money? There's somebody going to work today going, I got this money. What am I going to do with it? You know, um, there's always more money. There is never more time. I guess the good news is there's never any less time. We all have the same 24 hours. So yeah, thanks for sharing that, Brian. Who else has a question or a comment?
Brian has a question. I think it's on chat. He's saying one of the challenges I've seen people experience is the transition points going from founder-led to building the team.
So the question is, how do you go from founder to building the teams? So the best way to do it is to watch what you do throughout the day for, let's say, a week or two, and not just what you're doing, but why you're doing it. And what I mentioned in the book, the Output Thinking book, is that there are these 7 buckets that all the outputs in a company fill. And so the reason why you're doing something is which bucket are you filling? And that's much more enlightening than to know, let's say I spend 2 hours on email every day. Well, why are you doing the email? How much of it is for a sale versus, say, hiring somebody versus, say, fixing a problem with tech support or whatever it is? Knowing which buckets you're working on. That's the first step, is to just see what you do. What are the demands on your time? And then to say, which ones of these are the easiest ones for me to get rid of? Which ones can I most easily hire for somebody else or outsource somebody else or automate somebody else? Because if you can get some of that work done by other people who are less well trained than you, less experienced than you, less costly than you, that will move things along and free up your time. As you do that, the company will grow to a point where, oh, now we have people doing all this work. Somebody needs to manage them. So there's another level of manager that you need to put in there, and you need to account for that person because you'll be the manager initially. Let's say you hire a salesperson. Well, you're going to be managing the salesperson. You might hire 2 or 3 or 4 salespeople before you need to hire an actual sales manager that's not you. But when you do, that will free up a huge amount of your time. The key, to summarize, is to know what the outputs are that need to be produced and how you can get other people to produce those outputs. Thanks for asking. Yep.
Anyone else has any other question or would like to participate? Okay, so thanks everyone for joining. John, thank you for being here and to accept the invitation. We're going to be posting the recording at the school today and also forwarding the recording via email. Oh, we have another question is how can we get more resources from CEO Bootcamp?
Email me. Tell me what you need. Or go to ceobootcamp.com. At the website, you can find a lot of the blog posts and other things that I've written over the years. You can find a link to buy the book. You can find a link for a free coaching session as well. So,
I'm sure to forward the recording with your email, John, and the link that you sent me
okay.
for the consultation. Okay.
Thanks for having me, everybody, and thanks for participating.
Thank you, John.
Take care.